For over 4,200 years, they've remained untouched by time. Ancient secrets locked in the stones of forgotten temples, in the shifting sands of civilizations long past. But the deeper we look, the more questions we uncover. How were these monumental feats of engineering achieved with such limited tools? What knowledge did these distant cultures possess that defies all our understanding? These mysteries haven't just endured the centuries, they've defied explanation. Experts remain baffled. So what's the truth hidden beneath the layers of history? So sit back, relax, and join us as we unravel the enigma that has stumped the world for millennia. In the arid stretches of the ancient Near East, beneath the blistering sun, lie remnants of a world lost to time, a world that was, for a brief but crucial moment, irrevocably altered. Here, in the heart of what we now call Palestine, the land is not just a canvas of deserts and hills, but a silent witness to one of the most enigmatic chapters in human history. The story begins roughly 4,200 years ago, when the climate, as if on cue, began to shift in ways that would unravel the foundations of ancient civilizations. The climate shift, now known as the 4.2 Kiloyear climate event, is a dramatic and mysterious marker in the timeline of the Earth. What caused it? And what did it truly mean for those who lived through it? As we dig deeper into the past, we uncover a veil of uncertainty, where facts and speculation intertwine, and where history may have hidden more than we realize. Across ancient cities and settlements, the signs were undeniable. Crop failures, droughts that spanned entire regions, and the collapse of once thriving urban centers. For those who lived at the time, the world must have seemed to fall apart with little warning. One moment, there was life, stability, and flourishing cultures. The next, vast regions of fertile land became dust bowls. And as the sun beat down, the rains vanished, leaving once pristine rivers to dry up, their lifeblood now a distant memory. Mainstream scholars suggest that the 4.2 Kiloyear event was a global, rapid climate shift, a transition to a much drier world that set off a cascade of social, political, and economic consequences. The effects were felt across the ancient Near East, from the Fertile Crescent to the lands of Egypt. Cities, once full of life and promise, were abandoned. Nomadic tribes spread across the land, forced to adapt to a harsher environment that left no room for complacency. But the cause of this dramatic shift remains elusive. Some propose that a series of volcanic eruptions released massive amounts of ash and aerosols into the atmosphere, casting a shadow across the Earth, cooling the planet and triggering severe droughts. Others suggest a shift in oceanic currents or even changes in solar activity. Yet none of these explanations fully account for the scale of the upheaval or the speed at which it struck. How could such a cataclysmic event unfold in such a short time, and why did it have such specific regional effects? If we peer into the mystery through the lens of ancient records, we find more questions than answers. Some ancient texts, obscure and cryptic as they are, speak of great famines, droughts, and divine wrath that followed a time of great darkness. Is it possible that our ancestors witnessed, in their own way, a catastrophic shift that their limited understanding could only describe in the language of gods and omens? These texts, while fragmentary and open to interpretation, offer tantalizing glimpses of a world struggling to comprehend forces far beyond their control. There is also a more speculative theory, one that has gained traction in recent years. The idea that this climate event was not just a natural disaster but a tipping point, a trigger that catalyzed the collapse of entire civilizations. Could this event have been the unseen hand that nudged early human societies toward conflict, migration, and eventual decline? Or was it merely a catalyst for deeper, more profound changes in the human psyche, an awakening to the fragility of life and the earth itself? While the mainstream narrative paints a picture of an Earth in turmoil, the fringe theories invite us to ask unsettling questions. Could there have been something more to this event? Was it a sign from the divine, or merely a natural consequence of planetary cycles we are still too ignorant to fully understand? And then, there are the other questions. Questions we are only beginning to ask. What if the collapse triggered by the 4.2 Kiloyear event was not just a result of climate, but of deeper, more complex forces that we are only now starting to trace? What if the event itself was a turning point, not just for civilizations, but for human understanding of our relationship with the Earth? As we examine the ancient ruins and the skeletal remains of those who lived through these harrowing times, we are left with a haunting truth. The past still holds its secrets. The 4.2 Kiloyear climate event remains an enigma, its full impact yet to be fully understood. And perhaps, buried beneath the sands of time, there is more waiting to be uncovered. As we turn the page on the 4.2 Kiloyear climate event, a strange and inexplicable series of events continues to unfold, leading us to one of the greatest enigmas of the ancient world: the sudden collapse of the Akkadian Empire. Stretching across the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, the Akkadian Empire, which rose to prominence around 2300 BC, was once the greatest political and military power in the Near East. Its king, Sargon of Akkad, carved out an empire that unified much of what we now consider the heart of the ancient world. Yet, by 2200 BC, just a few generations after its zenith, the empire collapsed. Suddenly, violently, and without clear explanation. In the heart of what is now Iraq, beneath the scorching desert sun, lie the ruins of Akkad, the capital city of the empire. Once a thriving metropolis of grand palaces and imposing temples, Akkad now exists as little more than a patch of broken earth, its remnants slowly consumed by the sands of time. The city's very location remains somewhat uncertain, adding another layer of mystery to its downfall. But what happened to bring down an empire so vast and so powerful? Mainstream historians agree on the broad strokes. The collapse of the Akkadian Empire occurred in the midst of a period of severe drought, possibly tied to the same 4.2 Kiloyear climate event that caused widespread disruption across the Near East. Evidence from ancient texts and archaeological findings suggests that the empire, once a symbol of centralized power and wealth, began to disintegrate due to a combination of environmental stress, social unrest, and perhaps even military invasion. But the true extent of the collapse remains a puzzle, as the written records from the time are few and far between, and those that do exist offer only fragments of a much larger story. The city of Akkad itself was abandoned, its once bustling markets silenced. The great agricultural fields that had sustained the empire withered under the relentless heat and lack of rainfall. The king's palaces and temples, which once showcased the grandeur of Akkadian civilization, lay in ruins. Inscriptions from the time hint at a society on the brink, with references to famine, water shortages, and even the desperation of the people who saw their world unravel. But there's more. In the decades leading up to the collapse, there were ominous signs of internal strife. The Akkadian kings, notably Sargon's successors, faced increasing challenges in maintaining control over a vast and diverse empire. The once unified Akkadian territories began to fracture as regional leaders and governors sought to assert their autonomy. Was the empire's downfall solely the result of natural forces, or were there deeper political and social tensions at play? Was the environment the ultimate cause, or merely a trigger for underlying issues? As we explore the ruins of Akkad and the surrounding region, we find ourselves wondering, was there more to this collapse than meets the eye? Some researchers speculate that the Akkadians faced more than just the wrath of nature. Could there have been a more catastrophic, perhaps even supernatural, element to the downfall of this empire? Ancient texts, though often ambiguous, speak of gods turning their backs on humanity, of divine punishment for the sins of kings and people alike. Was it simply a matter of climate change? Or could the Akkadian rulers have offended their gods in ways that history has left unsaid? In addition to these theories, the physical evidence of the collapse remains perplexing. While we know that the Akkadian cities were abandoned, the archaeological record doesn't always align with the idea of a swift, cataclysmic collapse. In some areas, it appears as though the people simply left, rather than being violently displaced. Could the collapse have been a slow, creeping decay? Or was there a sudden, catastrophic event that drove people to flee in panic? The 4.2 Kiloyear climate event is an obvious candidate for triggering these cascading failures. But what if it wasn't the sole cause? Could there have been other factors at play, economic shifts, cultural changes, or even internal betrayals that hastened the end of the Akkadian Empire? The mysteries surrounding the Akkadian collapse are as elusive as the empire itself. Despite decades of research and exploration, historians are still far from a definitive answer. Was it the environment, the gods, or a combination of both that sealed the Akkadians' fate? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, what might we be overlooking in our search for answers? The fall of the Akkadian Empire remains one of the great unsolved puzzles of ancient history. With each new discovery, we get a little closer to understanding the forces that shaped this remarkable civilization's sudden demise. But as we dig deeper, we're left with more questions than answers. And so, the mystery continues to unfold. As we continue our exploration of ancient mysteries, we find ourselves drawn to another enigma, one that lies beneath the shifting sands of time, almost forgotten, yet tantalizingly elusive. In the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, just beyond the reach of recorded history, there existed a kingdom known only through the cryptic texts left by the Sumerians. The kingdom of Aratta, an entity that may have once rivaled the mighty Sumerian city-states, is known primarily through its mention in the epics of Sumerian literature. But what remains of it? Where was it? And perhaps most perplexing of all, why does it seem to have vanished without a trace? In the epic tales of the Sumerian king Gilgamesh, the kingdom of Aratta is described as a land of great wealth and power. Its cities, according to the Sumerian texts, were adorned with stunning buildings of lapis lazuli, and its kings held dominion over vast territories. Aratta, however, was not a kingdom that left behind physical evidence of its existence. No sprawling ruins, no city walls or palaces to mark its place on the map. Instead, it exists only in the form of a few references in ancient writings, making it a kingdom of myth and speculation as much as one of history. Some scholars have argued that Aratta could have been a real kingdom, but its precise location remains a matter of intense debate. The most popular theory places it somewhere in the Iranian plateau, to the northeast of Mesopotamia, although no archaeological evidence has definitively supported this claim. The descriptions found in the Sumerian texts, filled with lavish imagery and hints of a sophisticated society, suggest a civilization that could have rivaled the great city-states of the time, like Uruk and Ur. Yet, after the Sumerians wrote about it, the kingdom simply disappears from the historical record. One of the most puzzling aspects of Aratta's story is the fact that it existed almost entirely in the realm of written records. Unlike other great civilizations, which left behind monumental structures and grand artifacts, Aratta seems to have left nothing behind but stories. The absence of physical evidence is perplexing. Could it be that Aratta was a purely text-based civilization, one that existed primarily in the minds of its scribes, and whose wealth and power were conveyed through stories rather than material possessions? This notion raises unsettling questions about the nature of history itself. How much of what we know is based on what has been preserved, and how much has been lost to time, never to be seen again? The most detailed description of Aratta comes from the Sumerian king list and other epic texts, which tell of the kingdom's riches and its fabled king, who was said to be in possession of treasures that could rival even the gods. One text recounts the story of Gilgamesh's journey to Aratta, where he sought to acquire the precious materials of the kingdom: gold, silver, and the rarest of gems. In these stories, Aratta is depicted as a place of wonder and mystery, almost an unreachable paradise. But as quickly as it appears in Sumerian lore, it disappears from the historical record, its once great civilization vanishing into the fog of antiquity. What happened to Aratta? Was it destroyed by natural disasters, as some have speculated? Or was it swallowed up by the rise of more dominant powers, like the Akkadians or Sumerians? One theory suggests that Aratta could have been a victim of the 4.2 Kiloyear climate event, which caused widespread droughts and environmental shifts across the ancient world. If Aratta's prosperity relied heavily on agriculture, it may have fallen prey to the same climatic forces that led to the collapse of other great civilizations. But there are also more speculative theories. Could Aratta have been a place that existed only in the imagination of the ancient world? Perhaps a utopian vision, a mythic city conjured by scribes to symbolize wealth, power, and divine favor. Could the kingdom have been a reflection of the ideal rather than the real? The most unsettling possibility, however, is that the disappearance of Aratta is not merely a matter of natural decline or conquest, but a mystery that goes deeper than we can comprehend. Could there have been forces at play, political, social, or even mystical, that led to its abrupt vanishing from history? And why, after thousands of years, do we still know so little about this fascinating kingdom? Was it deliberately erased from memory, or did it simply fade away, leaving behind only the faintest traces of its existence in the dusty annals of ancient literature? As we stand in the shadow of this mystery, we are left with more questions than answers. What really happened to the kingdom of Aratta? Was it a myth, a dream, or a civilization lost to the ages? And what might still lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered? Perhaps the answers are closer than we think, buried beneath layers of time, waiting for someone to decipher the codes and mysteries that remain just out of reach. As we shift our focus from the mythical kingdom of Aratta to the towering monuments of ancient Egypt, we enter a world that, to this day, stands as a testament to the ingenuity and ambition of humankind. The pyramids of Giza, immense, awe-inspiring, and seemingly eternal, have long captured the imagination of the world. These colossal structures, built during Egypt's Old Kingdom period, represent the pinnacle of architectural and cultural achievement. Yet, despite their grandeur, the story of the Old Kingdom comes to a sudden and mysterious end around 2200 BC, leaving behind a civilization that, for reasons still not entirely understood, seemingly collapsed almost overnight. In the shadow of the Great Pyramid, we gaze upon the remnants of what was once a society that spanned centuries, its reach extending from the lush banks of the Nile to the desert sands. The Old Kingdom was a time of unrivaled prosperity, when Egypt was united under the rule of powerful pharaohs who built monumental tombs and temples, establishing a legacy that would echo through the millennia. The pyramid complex of Giza, with its perfect alignment to the stars and its mathematical precision, was a symbol of Egypt's divine order, a civilization that, by all accounts, should have continued to thrive. But by the end of the Old Kingdom, something went horribly wrong. The grand structures were no longer being constructed, and the once glorious pharaohs began to lose their grip on power. Cities that had flourished during the Pyramid Age saw their populations dwindle. The economy faltered. Even the monumental tombs that had been so carefully constructed for the pharaohs became abandoned and unfinished, as if the world that had supported them had suddenly ceased to exist. What could have caused such a dramatic shift in the trajectory of one of the world's oldest and most sophisticated civilizations? The decline of the Old Kingdom is marked by a series of complex and often contradictory events. Mainstream historians point to a variety of potential causes: a devastating series of droughts, shifts in the Nile's flooding patterns, and even a breakdown in central authority due to weak or ineffective rulers. The 4.2 Kiloyear climate event, which had such a profound effect on other civilizations in the ancient Near East, is often cited as a key factor. A prolonged period of low Nile floods would have crippled Egypt's agriculture, leading to widespread famine, social unrest, and the weakening of the state. Yet, these explanations don't fully account for the suddenness of the collapse. Egypt, with its well-organized bureaucracy and powerful religious institutions, had survived countless challenges over the centuries. So, why did the Old Kingdom falter so abruptly? Why, after the reign of some of the greatest pharaohs in history, did this seemingly indomitable civilization fall into disarray? Some researchers have posited that the decline of the Old Kingdom was the result of internal strife. Perhaps, as Egypt's rulers became more distant from the needs of their people, their authority weakened. The growing power of local officials may have led to the decentralization of the kingdom, a gradual erosion of the centralized control that had allowed the pharaohs to maintain their absolute power. Could political infighting and corruption have hastened Egypt's downfall as much as environmental stress? There are also more speculative theories that invite us to look beyond the conventional explanations. Some have suggested that the decline of the Old Kingdom could be linked to a deeper, more profound change in the Egyptian worldview. Was there a loss of faith in the gods who had guided Egypt's prosperity? Could the collapse have been a result of a shift in religious beliefs? A sudden realization that the divine order sustaining Egypt was no longer in balance? If the gods themselves had turned away from Egypt, could that have signaled the end of an era? Others propose a more radical idea, that the decline was not entirely the result of internal or environmental factors, but rather a sudden and mysterious external force. Could there have been a foreign invasion, or a sudden series of catastrophic events that wiped out key leadership? Theories about external influences, such as invasions or even climate-related migration of neighboring peoples, offer intriguing possibilities but lack concrete evidence. One of the most haunting aspects of the Old Kingdom's decline is the absence of definitive answers. Unlike other ancient civilizations, Egypt left behind an immense record of its history. Yet, despite the wealth of inscriptions, tombs, and artifacts, the cause of the Old Kingdom's fall remains as elusive as the Sphinx, a puzzle wrapped in the sands of time. As we stand before these monumental ruins, we are left to wonder, could there be more to the story than we have yet uncovered? What if the real reason for the fall of the Old Kingdom is still hidden, buried beneath centuries of shifting sands and forgotten history? Could it be that the answers are closer than we think, waiting to be rediscovered? The decline of the Old Kingdom remains one of history's most tantalizing mysteries, a story that has yet to be fully told, one that invites us to look deeper into the shadows of Egypt's ancient past. As we continue our journey through the mysteries of ancient civilizations, we find ourselves once again at the heart of Egypt, where the ancient Nile River, with its timeless flow, has been the lifeblood of one of the world's most enduring cultures. For millennia, the annual flooding of the Nile provided the fertile soil needed to sustain Egypt's vast population. This predictable cycle, an almost sacred event, allowed the pharaohs to build their empire, shaping Egypt into the powerful civilization it became. But as the Old Kingdom came to an end, something inexplicable began to happen to the Nile. The once reliable floods began to shift, triggering a crisis that no one could have foreseen. Imagine standing along the banks of the Nile, gazing out over the still waters, knowing that each year the river's rise would bring a new cycle of life, water spreading across the plains, enriching the soil, and ensuring the harvests that would feed the people. This was the rhythm of Egypt for centuries, a constant that provided the foundation for the mighty civilization. But by the close of the Old Kingdom, something went awry. The floods, which had been so predictable and dependable, suddenly became erratic and unpredictable. Historical records, though scarce, reveal that by the end of the 3rd millennium BC, the Nile's flooding patterns began to dramatically change. The floods, once a blessing, became a curse. Instead of arriving on time with the familiar increase in water levels, they began to fail. In some years, they were too low, leaving the land parched and barren. In other years, they were too high, submerging crops and washing away entire villages. This sudden shift disrupted not only the agricultural calendar, but the very foundation of Egyptian society, throwing the kingdom into chaos. For a civilization so deeply reliant on the rhythm of the Nile, this unexpected change was nothing short of catastrophic. Egypt's kings, who had long been revered as living gods, began to lose control of the situation. The kingdom's wealth, built on the bounty of the Nile, began to erode, and the old kingdom's once unshakable power faltered. The great pyramid tombs that had been constructed in tribute to the pharaohs lay unfinished, their purpose seemingly thwarted by forces beyond the control of even the most powerful rulers. Mainstream scholars point to the 4.2 Kiloyear climate event as the primary cause of the Nile's erratic flooding. This widespread environmental shift, caused by a period of prolonged droughts and disruptions to global weather patterns, could have severely impacted the river's annual cycle. The lower Nile, which flows through Egypt, may have suffered from diminished rainfall and reduced upstream flooding. As the rains in the Ethiopian highlands, where the Blue Nile, the primary tributary, originates, dried up, the river's flooding became less reliable, triggering a cascade of failures across Egypt. But this explanation, though compelling, doesn't fully account for the suddenness of the change. Could the flooding's unpredictability have been tied to a deeper, more profound shift in the environment? Some fringe theories propose that the Nile's strange behavior could have been influenced by factors as varied as volcanic activity, changes in the Earth's orbit, or even a cosmic event. Could there have been an extraterrestrial influence, a natural occurrence so far beyond the comprehension of ancient Egyptians that they could only interpret it as a divine punishment? Moreover, the timing of the Nile's transformation coincides closely with the end of the Old Kingdom. Was it solely environmental factors that caused the collapse of this mighty civilization, or was there more to the story? Could the erratic flooding have been a symptom of a much larger, unseen force, something that the ancient Egyptians may have sensed but couldn't understand? Could the failure of the Nile have shaken the very foundations of the Egyptian belief system, causing the people to question their gods and their rulers in ways that set the stage for the kingdom's downfall? The mystery of the Nile's shifting patterns is a puzzle that continues to intrigue modern researchers. Even with advanced technology, scientists are still not entirely sure what caused this drastic change or why it occurred so suddenly. Was it the natural consequence of global climate shifts, or was there something more extraordinary at play? As we look back on these events, we are left with lingering questions that continue to haunt our understanding of Egypt's past. What caused the Nile to betray the Egyptians, and how did it influence the broader collapse of the Old Kingdom? Perhaps the answer is hidden somewhere in the depths of the Nile, waiting to be uncovered by future explorers. Or perhaps it is a mystery that will remain lost to time, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations can be brought to their knees by forces beyond their control. What might still lie hidden, waiting for us to discover? As we turn our attention once more to the ancient Near East, we find ourselves standing in the midst of the ruins of a once great city, its walls, now crumbled and weathered, telling a story of triumph, trade, and sudden destruction. This is Ebla, an ancient city that thrived around 2300 BC, a powerful center of commerce and culture in the heart of what we now call Syria. Its vast archives, discovered in the 1970s, revealed a civilization that was remarkably advanced, with a well-developed writing system, intricate diplomacy, and a network of trade routes stretching across the Mediterranean and into Mesopotamia. Yet, in a single violent event, Ebla was shattered, its brilliance lost to the ages, its once thriving streets left silent and empty. Imagine walking through the ancient city of Ebla. The streets are lined with towering structures made of mud brick, their faded walls still echoing with the whispers of a society that knew prosperity and power. The bustling markets, once teeming with merchants from distant lands, are now abandoned. The great royal palace, with its majestic courtyards and carefully carved reliefs, stands as a solemn reminder of a city that once commanded the world's attention. Ebla was not just a regional power, it was a key player in the intricate web of ancient trade, a city whose influence stretched far beyond the borders of its homeland. But then, around 2300 BC, the unthinkable happened. The city fell. In a violent and unexplained destruction, Ebla was reduced to ruins. The evidence is stark: charred remnants of buildings, signs of fierce fires, and the telltale marks of a city caught in the grip of a sudden, catastrophic event. What caused this swift and decisive end to a city that had seemed poised for greatness? Was it a natural disaster, a military conquest, or something far more mysterious? Mainstream historians have suggested that the destruction of Ebla could have been the result of a conflict with neighboring city-states, particularly those from the growing power of Mesopotamia. During this period, warfare was common as competing states vied for control of trade routes and resources. Some scholars point to the rise of the Akkadian Empire and the possible military campaigns led by Sargon of Akkad as a catalyst for the destruction. The Akkadians were known for their military prowess and their expansionist ambitions, and it's not outside the realm of possibility that they targeted Ebla as part of their broader conquest of the region. However, this theory has its problems. The evidence of military conquest is not as clear as we would expect. Archaeologists have found no signs of large-scale military engagement, such as siege weapons or battle wounds on the city's walls. Instead, the city seems to have been destroyed more suddenly, with fires sweeping through the buildings in a way that suggests an unexpected and rapid attack. Could this be evidence of a more enigmatic force at play? Was Ebla destroyed by something other than an invading army, perhaps an internal uprising, or even a natural event? Another theory that has been posited is the possibility of environmental factors, particularly the changing climate. As we saw with the decline of the Old Kingdom in Egypt, climate shifts can wreak havoc on ancient civilizations. The 4.2 Kiloyear climate event, which caused droughts and famine across the ancient Near East, might have played a role in the downfall of Ebla. If the city's agricultural base was severely affected by changing weather patterns, it could have led to food shortages, economic instability, and internal strife. Could this environmental stress have triggered a breakdown in the social order, leading to the city's destruction from within? Then there are more speculative theories that propose a more dramatic cause for Ebla's fall. Some have suggested that the city could have been struck by a large meteorite or an asteroid, which would explain the widespread fires and sudden destruction. While no direct evidence of such an impact has been found, the idea that an extraterrestrial event could have devastated a city is one that has intrigued both scientists and those fascinated by the mysteries of the ancient world. Could Ebla have been the victim of a cosmic event? A moment when the heavens themselves seemed to conspire against the city's prosperity? As we dig deeper into the mystery of Ebla's fall, we are faced with more questions than answers. Was the city destroyed by the hand of man or by the wrath of nature? Was it a violent conquest, an environmental collapse, or perhaps something more inexplicable? something that has yet to be uncovered. And why did Ebla's legacy disappear so completely from the historical record? Unlike other ancient civilizations, whose ruins continued to inspire awe and reverence, Ebla's remains were almost lost to history, buried beneath centuries of neglect and mystery. What remains of Ebla today is a city frozen in time, its past slowly being uncovered by modern archaeologists. Yet, despite the wealth of information found in its archives, the true cause of Ebla's destruction remains elusive. The city's fate, like so many other ancient mysteries, is still a riddle, a puzzle that resists simple explanations. Could there be more to the story, hidden in the layers of ash and rubble that cover the city's once grand streets? What might still be waiting to be discovered, just beyond the reach of our understanding? The fall of Ebla is one of the great unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. And as we continue to search for answers, we are reminded that the past, for all its revelations, still holds many secrets. As we move further into the enigmatic landscape of the ancient Near East, we find ourselves standing on the ruins of Tel Brak, a city that, at its height, was one of the most significant urban centers of northern Mesopotamia. Located in what is now modern-day Syria, Tel Brak thrived around 3000 BC, long before the rise of the great empires of the region. Its towering walls and intricate layouts reveal a society that was not only advanced in urban planning, but also deeply entrenched in trade, culture, and religion. Yet, like so many ancient cities, Tel Brak was suddenly, violently, and inexplicably consumed by fire, leaving behind a mystery that still haunts archaeologists today. Imagine standing amidst the ruins of Tel Brak, the sun casting long shadows over the broken stone and charred earth. The city, once vibrant with life, is now little more than a series of scattered stones and crumbling structures. Its broad avenues, which once bustled with merchants and travelers, are now silent. In the heart of the city, the remains of monumental buildings lay half buried beneath the earth, their once pristine walls blackened by an intense heat. This is not a city abandoned over time. This is a city that was destroyed. Destroyed in a manner so abrupt and violent that the scars left behind still tell the tale. The cause of Tel Brak's sudden destruction remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. The evidence is clear. Intense heat and widespread fire consumed the city. Charred remains of structures, melted pottery, and burnt bones suggest that the city was deliberately set ablaze, or at the very least, that the fire was no accident. But who would have attacked such a thriving and prosperous city, and why? Was this an external invasion, an internal revolt, or something altogether different? Historians and archaeologists have long debated the cause of Tel Brak's destruction. Some have suggested that the city fell victim to a large-scale invasion. The surrounding region was home to a number of city-states, many of which were engaged in conflict and competition for resources during this period. Could Tel Brak have been overwhelmed by a rival city-state? The evidence, however, is not conclusive. There are no signs of large-scale battle, no arrowheads embedded in the walls, no defensive structures breached by attacking forces. The destruction appears more sudden and systematic, like a fire set deliberately rather than the chaotic aftermath of a siege. Others have proposed the possibility of an internal revolt. Could the inhabitants of Tel Brak, disillusioned by the ruling elites or suffering from some form of economic or social unrest, have turned against their rulers? If this were the case, it would be one of the earliest recorded instances of a revolt leading to the utter destruction of a city. But again, the evidence does not clearly support this theory. There are no signs of mass executions or the kind of destruction that would typically accompany a rebellion. Instead, the fire seems to have ravaged the city as a whole, sparing no one, whether they were part of the elite or commoners. And then, there is the possibility of something even more mysterious, something that has puzzled researchers for years. Could the burning of Tel Brak have been caused by a natural disaster? Earthquakes, which are common in the region, could have triggered fires or structural collapses. However, no evidence of seismic activity has been found in the archaeological record, leaving this theory in the realm of speculation. The most intriguing possibility, however, lies in the idea that Tel Brak's destruction could have been the result of a religious or ritualistic act. In many ancient cultures, cities and temples were sometimes burned or destroyed in symbolic acts of devotion, often to appease gods or mark the end of an era. Could the fire have been a form of sacrifice or an attempt to cleanse the city, a ritual that spiraled out of control? While this theory is speculative, it raises the question of how ancient societies viewed their cities, not just as places of living, but as sacred spaces that could be purged or renewed through fire. In addition to these theories, one of the most striking aspects of Tel Brak's destruction is the lack of written records. While the city was a major center of trade and culture, it left behind no clear documentation of its fall. Unlike other civilizations, where the collapse of a major city might be chronicled in the annals of a conqueror or ruler, Tel Brak's end is shrouded in silence. This only adds to the mystery. Could the reason for this silence be an intentional erasure, perhaps by those responsible for the destruction, or was it simply lost to the ravages of time? As we stand among the ruins of Tel Brak, we are left to ponder the nature of its fall. Was it an act of war, a revolt, or a ritualistic cleansing? Did the city collapse under the weight of internal strife, external pressure, or environmental disaster? The truth remains elusive, hidden beneath the ashes and the rubble. And perhaps, like so many ancient mysteries, it is a story that may never fully be told. What remains clear, however, is that the burning of Tel Brak was no ordinary event. It was a moment in history that forever altered the course of a great city, leaving behind a puzzle that continues to intrigue and baffle those who seek to uncover its secrets. Could the final piece of this mystery still be hidden beneath the ruins, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? Only time will tell. As we leave behind the smoldering ruins of Tel Brak, we now turn our focus to one of the most profound and enigmatic chapters in early Sumerian history, the mysterious destruction of several of its greatest cities. In the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers cradled the rise of civilization, a collection of powerful city-states once flourished. Cities like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu became the heart of Sumer, laying the foundations for writing, governance, and trade. Yet, as quickly as these cities rose, they seemed to disappear, suddenly and violently. What caused these early Sumerian cities to collapse, seemingly overnight? Imagine standing amid the ruins of one of these ancient cities, where great ziggurats once soared towards the heavens, their monumental steps leading to the gods themselves. The streets, once alive with merchants and priests, are now quiet, their stones worn and fractured by the passage of millennia. The city, once a symbol of human achievement, is now a shadow of its former self. The walls, which once stood as a bulwark against invaders, are crumbled, and the very earth beneath your feet tells a story of an abrupt, catastrophic event. What we know for certain is that by the end of the 3rd millennium BC, several key Sumerian cities were destroyed in a way that doesn't fit the typical patterns of invasion or natural disaster. The evidence is clear in the archaeological record. There are signs of widespread destruction, including burned buildings, abandoned urban centers, and the sudden disappearance of entire populations. But what we don't know, and what has baffled scholars for centuries, is why these cities were destroyed and who was responsible. Historians have long pointed to external invaders as the cause of this destruction. One common theory suggests that the cities fell victim to the growing power of outside forces, perhaps nomadic tribes or foreign city-states seeking to take advantage of Sumer's wealth. In particular, the Gutians, a people from the Zagros Mountains to the east of Sumer, are often blamed for this period of upheaval. The Sumerian king list mentions a series of Gutian rulers who swept through Sumer, bringing with them destruction and chaos. The sudden collapse of key cities during this time, such as Uruk and Ur, seems to align with this theory, pointing to a violent external force that ravaged the Sumerian world. However, the destruction of Sumer is not easily explained by a single external force. While there is evidence of invasions, they do not fully account for the nature of the destruction. The level of devastation across multiple cities suggests something more complex, perhaps a combination of factors. The Gutians, while a threat, were not the only possible culprits. Could the Sumerian cities have fallen to internal conflict? Were there revolts within these city-states, driven by the growing disparity between the elites and the common people? Or perhaps, as some have speculated, the cities were struck by a sudden and severe environmental change, a drought or shift in the river systems that led to widespread collapse and internal strife? As we explore these possibilities, we encounter another curious element in the archaeological record: evidence of a mysterious unknown war. In several of the cities that were destroyed, including the great city of Uruk, archaeologists have discovered signs of violent conflict that don't match the typical features of a foreign invasion. Instead, what we see are telltale signs of internal battles, urban warfare, and perhaps even betrayals among the city's elite. Could the destruction of Sumerian cities have been the result of a war fought within Sumer itself? An ancient civil war between competing factions, each vying for control over the once prosperous land? If so, who were the belligerents, and what was the cause of this violent and sudden implosion? Another theory proposes that the destruction was not simply a war, but a religious upheaval. Could the downfall of these cities have been driven by a radical shift in religious beliefs or a revolt against the power of the priesthoods? In Sumerian society, religion and politics were tightly intertwined, and the temples played a central role in the governance of the city-states. Could there have been a faction within the city that sought to overthrow the religious order, leading to a massive purge that consumed the cities themselves? As with many ancient mysteries, the truth lies somewhere in the intersection of known facts and tantalizing speculation. The evidence is sparse, and the city records, which might have once offered an explanation, are long gone, lost to time, forgotten by history. But what is undeniable is that the fall of early Sumerian cities was not a simple process. It was a complex, multifaceted event that involved war, internal strife, and perhaps environmental catastrophe, all converging at a single critical moment in time. As we reflect on the burning ruins of these ancient cities, we are left with a haunting question. What forces were at work that could so swiftly bring down such mighty civilizations? Was it the fury of a foreign invader, the violence of a civil war, or the desperation of a people facing disaster? Could the reasons for their destruction be lost forever, buried beneath the shifting sands of time? Or is there a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered, one that could forever change our understanding of the fall of early Sumer? The answers, it seems, are still beyond our reach, lost to history, waiting for the right discovery, the right piece of evidence to bring the full story to light. But for now, the fate of these cities remains a mystery, and the question of why Sumer fell continues to linger in the shadows of the ancient past. As we move deeper into the heart of Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, we find ourselves confronting one of the most puzzling enigmas in the history of early civilization: the sudden and unexplained disappearance of the early dynastic city-states. These city-states, such as Lagash, Umma, and Ur, once stood as powerful centers of trade, culture, and political influence. Yet, around the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, many of them vanished from the historical record, with little explanation. What could have caused the sudden decline of these vibrant urban hubs that seemed to shape the very foundation of Sumerian society? Picture, for a moment, the bustling streets of Lagash. Massive walls surround the city, protecting its grand temples, administrative buildings, and homes. The ziggurat of the city stands tall, a monument to the gods and a symbol of the power of the city-state. Trade caravans bring precious goods from distant lands, while priests conduct ceremonies in honor of the city's patron deity. The sounds of life reverberate through the city's well-planned streets, where merchants haggle and artisans work their crafts. Yet, in a span of just a few centuries, this thriving metropolis and many of its contemporaries would fall silent. The once bustling city-states were abandoned, their structures left to crumble, their people seemingly vanished without a trace. This sudden disappearance has left archaeologists and historians grasping for answers. One theory, widely accepted by mainstream scholars, points to the possibility of internal collapse due to political or economic instability. As the early dynastic period progressed, the competition between neighboring city-states grew fiercer, leading to frequent warfare. Could the relentless battles for dominance have exhausted the resources of these cities, leading to their eventual decline? The archaeological record does show evidence of conflict, including inscriptions and artifacts that suggest prolonged struggles for control of territory and resources. But the end of these city-states seems to have been far more abrupt than one might expect from such a slow-building internal conflict. Other explanations point to the role of environmental factors. The Mesopotamian region, while a cradle of civilization, was also a land prone to the unpredictable nature of river systems. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which had supported the agricultural base of these city-states for millennia, could have turned from life-giving forces to harbingers of destruction. Could the cities have been affected by unpredictable flooding, drought, or shifts in the river courses themselves? These cities were incredibly dependent on irrigation, and any changes in the water systems could have had catastrophic consequences for their agricultural output. If crop failures became widespread, how could these cities, already vulnerable from internal strife, survive? Could a widespread drought or famine have been the final blow? But what if the cause of their disappearance was something even more mysterious? Could the early dynastic city-states have faced an external threat so overwhelming that it caused their swift collapse? Some fringe theories suggest that nomadic groups, possibly from the Arabian Peninsula or the Iranian plateau, might have invaded and overwhelmed these cities. However, the lack of clear evidence of large-scale invasions or the remains of invading armies leaves this theory somewhat speculative. And while the idea of a sudden invasion is compelling, the archaeological record does not seem to fully support it. The cities were not only destroyed, they were abandoned, their structures left to decay without signs of external conquest. Then there is the possibility that the disappearance was more complex, a combination of environmental stress, political fragmentation, and economic collapse, all triggered by a sudden and cataclysmic event. Some scholars propose that a series of natural disasters, such as earthquakes or even a series of devastating storms, may have contributed to the downfall of these cities. If these disasters were widespread, they could have caused a breakdown in trade, communication, and agricultural production, essential components that kept these early dynasties functioning. Could the sudden collapse have been the result of a combination of internal disintegration, environmental shifts, and a series of unforeseen catastrophes that left these city-states vulnerable to collapse? Perhaps one of the most fascinating and unsettling possibilities is that we may never fully understand what happened to these cities. The lack of written records or clear evidence from the time of their fall leaves us with more questions than answers. Why were these cities abandoned so suddenly? What happened to the people who once lived there? Did they simply disperse, moving to other regions? Or were they wiped out by a force we still do not comprehend? And if the city-states of Sumer and Mesopotamia were so powerful, why did they fall so quickly and completely? Could there have been a hidden force at play, something we are not yet able to detect in the archaeological record? As we stand amidst the scattered remains of these ancient cities, it becomes clear that the mystery of their disappearance is one of the greatest unsolved puzzles of early human civilization. The rapid decline of the early dynastic city-states raises more questions than it answers, leaving us to wonder, was their fall the result of a long, slow decline or a catastrophic event that left no time for recovery? And in the gaps between the stones and ancient ruins, might there be clues, still waiting to be uncovered, that could finally unlock the secrets of why these cities fell into silence? The disappearance of these early dynastic cities may remain one of the great mysteries of the ancient world, their stories buried beneath the dust of millennia, waiting to be rediscovered, or perhaps forever lost. What lies beneath the surface, waiting to tell us the truth? As we continue to unravel the ancient mysteries of the Near East, we now turn our attention to an intriguing and unresolved enigma: the sudden and dramatic decline in trade between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BC. For centuries, these two great civilizations thrived in parallel, their influence spreading across vast regions. Mesopotamia, with its flourishing cities like Ur, Babylon, and Akkad, had developed an extensive trade network, reaching as far as the Indus Valley in present-day Pakistan and India. The two regions exchanged goods, Mesopotamian textiles and pottery for the highly prized Indus Valley beads, metals, and cotton. Yet, for reasons that remain a mystery, this vital trade suddenly collapsed, sending shockwaves through both civilizations. What caused the sudden rupture in one of the most important trade relationships of the ancient world? Imagine standing at the edge of a bustling Mesopotamian marketplace, where traders from the farthest corners of the known world gather to exchange goods. The air is thick with the smell of spices and incense, the clinking of bronze tools and beads fills the air, and merchants enthusiastically haggle for silk, ivory, and precious stones. Among the most valuable goods being traded are those that have crossed the vast desert and river systems from the Indus Valley, a land known for its well-planned cities, sophisticated drainage systems, and a mysterious script that has yet to be deciphered. The Indus Valley was a thriving center of commerce, and its connection with Mesopotamia brought wealth to both sides. Yet, somewhere around 1900 BC, this once thriving exchange ceased almost entirely. Archaeologists and historians have long been baffled by the sudden disruption in trade. What could have caused such a deep and immediate shift in this well-established network? The traditional explanation often points to the decline of the Indus Valley civilization, which itself seems to have crumbled around this time. But the reasons for this collapse are unclear. Some scholars believe that environmental factors, such as climate change or the shifting course of the river systems, could have made it increasingly difficult for the Indus cities to maintain their agricultural base, leading to internal strife and economic decline. If trade routes were interrupted by changing water levels, or if crops failed due to shifting monsoons, could the entire economic structure of the Indus Valley have collapsed in on itself, severing ties with Mesopotamia? However, the case is not so straightforward. If the Indus Valley was indeed the cause of the disruption, why was there no immediate evidence of violence or large-scale social upheaval? The Indus Valley cities, such as Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, show little sign of invasion or destruction by war. The collapse appears to have been more gradual, marked by a slow but steady decline rather than a sudden and catastrophic fall. So, what could have triggered the sharp break in trade, if not a collapse within the Indus Valley itself? An alternative theory suggests that it wasn't the decline of the Indus Valley, but rather an external force or change that affected both civilizations. One theory posits that the disruption of trade could have been caused by a major political shift in Mesopotamia. The rise of new powers or conflicts, such as the Akkadian Empire's expansion, might have disrupted established trade routes. If Mesopotamia's internal focus shifted toward consolidating power and resources, it might have led to a decrease in long-distance trade. But again, this doesn't explain why trade with the Indus Valley specifically halted. There were other trade routes that continued to function, even during times of political instability. Then, there are more speculative ideas that stretch the boundaries of traditional history. Could there have been a natural disaster that interrupted the flow of goods between the two regions? Earthquakes, flooding, or even volcanic activity could have altered the landscape in ways that disrupted key trade routes. Some have suggested that a major disaster, an earthquake along the Indus River, for example, could have destabilized the entire region, leading to a breakdown in commerce. While there is no direct evidence for such a catastrophic event, the idea that a sudden natural disaster could have severed trade ties is an intriguing one. Another, more outlandish theory suggests that a more mysterious factor could have been at play, a dramatic shift in cultural priorities or values. Could the people of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley have simply lost interest in trading with one another? Perhaps the Indus Valley found alternative sources of resources, or Mesopotamia turned inward, seeking to consolidate power within its own borders. While it's a difficult theory to prove, the idea that cultural shifts could result in the abandonment of a centuries-old trade system is a tantalizing possibility. Despite these theories, the historical record remains frustratingly silent on the exact reasons behind the trade collapse. The evidence that does exist, seals and pottery found in both regions, the traces of shared cultural symbols, suggests that the relationship between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley was more than just economic. It was, in many ways, a symbol of cultural exchange, of two great civilizations intertwined by trade and mutual influence. So why did it all come to an abrupt halt? As we stand on the cusp of ancient history, the sudden drop in trade between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley raises more questions than answers. Could it have been a natural disaster that severed the connection? A political shift that caused the two civilizations to turn their backs on each other? Or was it something even more mysterious? Something that time has hidden from us, locked away in the sands of the past? What remains undeniable is that the break in trade between these two great civilizations was no small event. It sent ripples through history, altering the course of both societies. The silence that followed, as the exchange of goods, culture, and knowledge ground to a halt, leaves us with an unsettling sense of mystery. What truly caused this rupture? What happened to the people who once thrived on the exchange of these precious goods? The answers, like so many others in the ancient world, remain just beyond our grasp, waiting perhaps for the next discovery to illuminate the past. As we shift our focus from the trade routes that once connected Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, we find ourselves in the heart of one of the most intriguing and unresolved mysteries of the ancient world, the sudden collapse of the early Indus Valley urban planning phase. The Indus Valley, with its advanced cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, was a marvel of urban design, one that outpaced many of its contemporaries in terms of infrastructure and organization. But somewhere around 1900 BC, these sophisticated cities began to crumble, their once bustling streets left eerily silent. What caused this sudden decline? Was it the result of an environmental catastrophe, a social upheaval, or something more mysterious? Imagine, for a moment, standing on the once thriving streets of Mohenjo-Daro. The city sprawls before you, its well-planned grid of streets stretching out in every direction, a testament to the advanced engineering of its builders. Public baths, sewage systems, and granaries are scattered throughout, revealing a society that was meticulously organized and far ahead of its time. The bustling marketplaces, where goods were traded from far and wide, have now gone silent. The people who once walked these streets have vanished, their homes abandoned. And yet, the city's infrastructure remains, a haunting reminder of the civilization's sudden disappearance. Archaeologists have long marveled at the precision and complexity of Indus Valley urban planning. The cities were laid out in a grid pattern, with wide streets and drainage systems that were far more advanced than those found in many other ancient cultures. The buildings were made of standardized bricks, and the entire city was designed with an attention to detail that speaks of a highly organized and centralized government. Yet, despite these remarkable achievements, the cities began to collapse around 1900 BC, leaving behind a mystery that still eludes explanation. For many years, mainstream scholars have proposed a range of theories to explain this sudden collapse. One of the most commonly cited explanations is environmental change, specifically shifts in the course of the river systems that were crucial to the Indus Valley's agricultural base. The region relied heavily on the seasonal flooding of the Indus River for irrigation, and any significant change in the river's course could have caused widespread crop failures, famine, and social unrest. Some archaeologists believe that a long-term drought or a series of shifts in the monsoon patterns might have led to a gradual decline in agricultural productivity, forcing the people of the Indus Valley to abandon their cities in search of more fertile land. However, while environmental factors certainly played a role, they don't fully explain the suddenness of the collapse. The scale and speed at which these cities fell into ruin suggests that there were other forces at play, forces that we may never fully understand. For example, the cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa show little evidence of violent conflict or warfare. Unlike other ancient civilizations, there are no clear signs of invasion, destruction, or conquest. Instead, what we see are cities that were abandoned, suddenly, almost as if the inhabitants simply disappeared. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro are devoid of life, but they do not bear the scars of battle. No burning, no shattered walls, just an eerie quiet that raises more questions than answers. This absence of violence has led some researchers to propose that the collapse of the Indus Valley was not the result of external forces, but of internal collapse. Could the tightly regulated and highly centralized system of urban planning have become a victim of its own success? Some have suggested that the city's rigid structure may have led to social unrest, with a growing divide between the elite and the common people. If the central authority could no longer maintain order or provide for its citizens, might the cities have simply fallen into disrepair as a result of internal strife or rebellion? Another theory suggests that the collapse was not the result of environmental or social factors, but of a more mysterious cause, perhaps a form of systemic collapse triggered by a change in the very fabric of Indus Valley society. Could there have been a cultural or ideological shift that caused the people of the Indus Valley to abandon their cities and urban way of life? Some fringe theories even suggest that the collapse could have been caused by an external force, a sudden plague, a shift in religious or political ideology, or even a cataclysmic event like an asteroid impact or volcanic eruption. These theories, while speculative, are difficult to dismiss entirely given the suddenness of the collapse and the lack of definitive evidence pointing to any one cause. As we stand amid the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, we are left with more questions than answers. What caused the sudden collapse of one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world? Was it the changing climate, internal political strife, or an unforeseen natural disaster? Or was it something more mysterious, an event so momentous that it left no trace but the empty streets of a once thriving city? The truth may never be fully known. The Indus Valley civilization, with its advanced urban planning, its mysterious script, and its sudden disappearance, remains one of the most enigmatic societies in history. Its cities, now silent and forgotten, continue to speak to us from the past, offering only fragments of a once great civilization. And as we search for answers, we are left to wonder, what hidden truths still lie buried beneath the dust of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa? What forces, seen or unseen, shaped the fate of the Indus Valley, and what might they have left behind for us to discover? As we delve deeper into the puzzle of ancient civilizations, we now turn our attention to a site that, for many years, seemed to stand as an early beacon of human settlement: Mehrgarh. Situated in the fertile plains of what is now modern-day Pakistan, Mehrgarh was one of the first places where evidence of agriculture and settled life appeared in the Indus Valley region. The settlement flourished around 7000 BC and continued to thrive for over 1,000 years. Yet, around 2600 BC, something happened. Mehrgarh suddenly and mysteriously disappeared from the archaeological record. What caused this once promising settlement to vanish, leaving only the faintest traces of its existence? Picture the site as it was over 4,000 years ago. The sun rises over the vast plains, casting long shadows over a series of mud brick homes arranged in orderly rows. The air is dry but cool, and the nearby river provides a steady source of water for the crops that feed the people of Mehrgarh. The people here, early settlers in a landscape that would later give rise to the mighty Indus Valley civilization, are at the dawn of an agricultural revolution. Evidence suggests that the inhabitants of Mehrgarh cultivated barley, wheat, and peas long before other regions had begun to develop such advanced farming techniques. In addition to the farming practices, the people of Mehrgarh also engaged in pottery making, metallurgy, and trade. They had a thriving community, and for centuries, this settlement grew and evolved into a central hub of the region. But as with so many ancient sites, the story of Mehrgarh takes a mysterious turn around 2600 BC. The settlement, once vibrant and thriving, is suddenly abandoned, its streets and homes left to decay. The reasons behind the sudden disappearance of Mehrgarh remain unclear, and it is here that the mystery deepens. What could have caused the people of such a sophisticated settlement to leave? Could it have been a natural disaster? Was it environmental collapse? Or was it something more sudden, a shift in cultural, political, or economic forces that caused the entire community to disband? Mainstream theories suggest that environmental factors might have played a role in the settlement's decline. The region around Mehrgarh, which once supported a fertile agricultural system, could have suffered from a shift in climate. Could the changing of monsoon patterns or an extended drought have led to the depletion of local water sources, making agriculture unsustainable? Indeed, evidence from other sites in the region points to environmental stress as a common factor in the decline of early agricultural settlements. The loss of reliable water sources could have forced the people of Mehrgarh to abandon their homes in search of more fertile land, just as so many civilizations would do in the centuries that followed. However, while environmental decline is a plausible explanation, it doesn't fully account for the abruptness of Mehrgarh's disappearance. The settlement did not seem to decline gradually, as one might expect from a civilization facing environmental or agricultural challenges. Instead, there is a marked and sudden absence of activity. Buildings and tools were left behind, as though the people simply vanished overnight. There are no signs of violent conflict, no evidence of a catastrophic event such as a fire or an invasion. This leads some researchers to propose that there may have been another, less obvious force at work. Could the disappearance of Mehrgarh have been the result of a more social or cultural upheaval? Some fringe theories suggest that the settlement's inhabitants may have been forced to abandon their homes due to a sudden political or religious shift. If the leadership structure of the settlement collapsed or was replaced by a different social order, the people of Mehrgarh may have moved away, seeking new opportunities or a more stable environment elsewhere. Others suggest that a trade route collapse or a disruption in the broader regional economy could have prompted the abandonment. With trade links severed or a sudden scarcity of vital resources, the people of Mehrgarh may have found themselves unable to continue sustaining their community. Yet, The most perplexing aspect of Mehrgarh's disappearance is the lack of evidence to support any of these theories conclusively. Despite extensive archaeological exploration, no clear explanation has emerged to shed light on why the settlement vanished so suddenly. Unlike other ancient cities that fell to war, famine, or invasion, Mehrgarh's demise remains an enigma. The abandoned homes, unburied tools, and vacant spaces speak volumes, but they leave us with an unsettling silence in place of answers. What happened to the people of Mehrgarh? Did they abandon their homes because of a shifting environment, or was the cause something more complex, social, political, or even cultural? Could they have left in search of better lands or new opportunities elsewhere? Or was their departure the result of a sudden, unforeseen event that forced them to leave everything behind? As we stand at the threshold of this ancient mystery, we are left with a lingering question. What truths still lie buried beneath the layers of earth at Mehrgarh? Was the abandonment of this early urban settlement a sign of the natural cycles of rise and fall that shape all civilizations? Or is there something deeper, still hidden, that could illuminate this ancient puzzle? The disappearance of Mehrgarh remains one of the many unanswered questions from the early history of human civilization, its silence echoing across time. As we continue to search for clues, we may one day uncover the missing pieces of this puzzle, or perhaps we will forever be left to wonder. As we continue our journey through the ancient world, we turn now to the mysterious decline of the Proto-Elamite civilization. Nestled in what is now southwestern Iran, Proto-Elamite cities like Susa stood as powerful centers of commerce, culture, and administration around 3000 BC. These early cities were home to a people whose influence spanned across regions, from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia to the distant mountains of Persia. Yet, much like so many other ancient civilizations, the Proto-Elamites faced an unexpected collapse, their cities abandoned and their once advanced society slipping into obscurity. What happened to this remarkable civilization? Imagine standing in the heart of the ancient city of Susa, a bustling urban center that once hummed with life. The air is thick with the sounds of merchants haggling in the marketplace, the clinking of pottery, and the rhythmic hum of loom and wheel. The streets are lined with monumental architecture, built with impressive mud brick structures and adorned with intricate carvings that tell the story of a people deeply connected to both their past and their future. The people of Susa, some of the earliest to develop a form of writing, had a thriving civilization that was rich in art, culture, and governance. Yet, the walls that once held their triumphs would soon fall silent. By around 2200 BC, the Proto-Elamite civilization began to unravel. The intricately planned cities that had once been thriving hubs of activity began to show signs of abandonment. The stunning artifacts and advanced systems of writing and administration that once marked the civilization's achievements slowly disappeared. But why? What could have caused such a sudden and dramatic decline in a civilization that had once appeared so secure in its power? Mainstream explanations point to a combination of factors, economic, environmental, and perhaps even social, that may have led to the Proto-Elamite collapse. Some researchers suggest that a dramatic shift in climate could have triggered agricultural failures, leading to food shortages. The region, like much of the ancient Near East, relied heavily on irrigation for agriculture, and any disruption to the water supply could have been devastating. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, along with the local Karun River, were crucial to the Proto-Elamites' success, and a dramatic change in their flow could have disrupted farming systems and triggered widespread famine. The Proto-Elamites were not the only ones affected by such environmental stress. Across the region, from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, we see evidence of similar environmental disruptions around this time. A sudden change in climate or a prolonged drought could have been the tipping point for the Proto-Elamites, forcing them to abandon their cities and seek more fertile land elsewhere. Yet, While this theory of environmental collapse is compelling, it does not explain why Proto-Elamite civilization vanished so quickly, leaving no clear remnants of a slow decline. It would seem that something more sudden and severe might have caused their cities to fall into ruin. Another theory posits that internal factors such as political strife or social upheaval played a significant role in the civilization's decline. The Proto-Elamite period is marked by the use of an early form of writing, which was primarily used for administrative and accounting purposes. This suggests a highly organized society with a centralized system of governance. If this system of governance collapsed, whether due to corruption, infighting, or the inability to maintain control over far-flung territories, could it have led to a rapid disintegration of the Proto-Elamite civilization? As cities and trade networks disbanded, it is possible that the entire social structure of the Proto-Elamites began to unravel, leaving behind only traces of what once was. Yet, perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Proto-Elamite collapse is the enigmatic disappearance of their written language. The Proto-Elamite script, used extensively in administrative records, is one of the earliest forms of writing known to humanity. And yet, after the civilization's fall, the script disappeared entirely. No records survive to explain what happened to this once thriving people, and the script remains undeciphered, locked away in an ancient code that has defied all attempts at translation. Could the loss of the written word symbolize the complete breakdown of the Proto-Elamite civilization? An entire culture lost to time with only fragmented clues to suggest what might have happened? Some have speculated that the Proto-Elamites fell victim to invasion or conquest, but no clear evidence supports this theory. Unlike other ancient cities, there are no signs of large-scale destruction or violent conflict in the ruins of Susa or other Proto-Elamite cities. In fact, the remains of these cities suggest a more gradual process of abandonment, with buildings left intact but vacant, tools left where they were last used, and no signs of a violent struggle. Could it be that the Proto-Elamites, rather than being overrun by foreign invaders, simply disappeared under the weight of their own internal challenges? The mysteries surrounding the fall of the Proto-Elamite civilization continue to captivate scholars and enthusiasts alike. While we may never fully understand the precise cause of their sudden disappearance, the unanswered questions remain. Was it a catastrophic environmental change, a political revolution, or the failure of a centralized administration that led to the collapse of this once thriving civilization? And why did their writing system vanish so abruptly, leaving behind no records of their downfall? As we explore the remains of the Proto-Elamites' cities and the remnants of their script, we are left to ponder, what forces were at work here? Forces that continue to elude us after over 4 millennia. What lies beneath the surface of these ruins, waiting to reveal more about a civilization whose story remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the ancient world? As we delve deeper into this enigma, the answers, if they exist, remain just beyond our grasp. And perhaps, in the shadows of time, the true cause of the Proto-Elamite collapse will continue to whisper to us, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. As we move forward in our exploration of ancient mysteries, we arrive in the Levant, an area that, for millennia, was a crossroads of cultures, empires, and trade. Here, among the sun-baked hills and arid plains of the eastern Mediterranean, lies one of history's great enigmas: the sudden disappearance of early Bronze Age settlements. These settlements, thriving around 2300 BC, seemed to vanish almost overnight, leaving behind only their silent ruins. What could have caused these once flourishing societies to collapse so abruptly? Imagine standing on the rocky outcrop of an ancient Levantine settlement. The sun beats down on the parched earth, its rays glinting off the weathered stones that make up the ruins of long-abandoned houses. Once, this place was vibrant, a thriving community with an active marketplace, skilled artisans, and a well-organized system of agriculture. The air would have been filled with the sounds of daily life, the clink of metal, the hum of trade, and the bustle of people going about their business. Yet now, centuries later, these same streets are empty. The only evidence of the civilization that once thrived here are broken pottery shards, ruined walls, and long-forgotten tools. The people have vanished, their fate sealed by forces that remain largely unknown. For many years, archaeologists have puzzled over the sudden disappearance of these settlements. The early Bronze Age Levant was a period of considerable advancement, with established trade routes, growing urban centers, and increasingly sophisticated social structures. Cities like Megiddo, Jericho, and Hazor flourished in this period, but by around 2000 BC, many of these once thriving settlements began to show signs of rapid decline. The buildings were abandoned, and the streets fell silent. But why? There are several mainstream theories that attempt to explain this dramatic shift. One of the most widely accepted is that a series of environmental changes, particularly climate shifts, may have been the primary cause. Evidence from the archaeological record suggests that the Levant experienced a period of severe droughts and arid conditions around this time. If this theory holds true, the sudden lack of water would have devastated agriculture, leading to food shortages and the eventual collapse of urban centers dependent on stable agricultural output. The Levant, like much of the ancient world, relied heavily on irrigation systems that were vulnerable to changes in climate. Without reliable access to water, these cities could not sustain their populations, and the settlements were slowly abandoned. Yet, while the theory of environmental collapse is compelling, it does not fully account for the suddenness of the decline. The abrupt abandonment of these cities suggests that there was something more at work, something that triggered an immediate response. Could a more sudden event, such as a natural disaster or a political upheaval, have played a role? Earthquakes, for example, are not uncommon in this region, and several ancient Levantine cities show signs of earthquake damage in their ruins. Could a massive earthquake have struck, causing widespread destruction and forcing people to flee? While no definitive evidence of a single catastrophic event has been found, it remains a possibility. Alternatively, some researchers suggest that these cities may have been abandoned due to external pressures, such as invasions or migrations. The Late Bronze Age, which followed the Early Bronze Age, was marked by considerable upheaval across the ancient world. The so-called Sea Peoples are often cited as one such migratory group who disrupted established civilizations around 1200 BC. While these invasions occurred later in history, it's conceivable that earlier waves of migration or external pressures could have influenced the Levantine settlements as well. Were the cities of the Levant forced to abandon their homes due to external attacks, or did their inhabitants flee in anticipation of greater threats? The absence of definitive evidence for such invasions leaves this theory speculative, but not entirely without merit. Another theory explores the possibility of social collapse. Could the very complexity of early Bronze Age society have led to its own downfall? The Levantine cities at this time had highly stratified societies, with powerful elites controlling trade and resources. It's possible that internal social tensions, perhaps between the ruling elite and the lower classes, led to civil unrest. Economic instability, coupled with growing inequality, could have sparked rebellion or revolt, leading to the rapid abandonment of cities. While the evidence for social upheaval is scarce, the idea that internal strife played a role in the fall of these cities cannot be easily dismissed. And then there are the more fringe theories, ideas that push the boundaries of conventional thought. Could the sudden disappearance of these settlements be linked to something beyond the physical realm? Some speculate about the influence of mysterious forces, such as unexplained cosmic events, or even extraterrestrial involvement, though these theories lack empirical evidence and remain highly speculative. Such ideas, though fascinating, are not widely accepted in mainstream scholarship, but they do raise an important question. What if the true cause of the settlement's disappearance lies outside of our current understanding of history? As we stand among the ruins of these ancient cities in the Levant, one thing is clear: their disappearance remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. Whether it was environmental change, political upheaval, or some other unforeseen event, the fate of these early civilizations is lost to time. The rubble and remnants of their settlements may offer clues, but they also raise new questions. What caused these once thriving cities to vanish so suddenly? And, perhaps more profoundly, what secrets of the past still lie buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be uncovered? As we continue to search for answers, we are left to wonder: what forces, seen or unseen, could have shaped the destiny of these ancient peoples, and what still remains hidden in the ancient dust of the Levant? The mystery, it seems, is far from over. As we leave behind the bustling cities of the Levant, we journey further south, toward a land that once hosted a very different kind of mystery. The vast expanse of the Sahara Desert, with its endless dunes and searing heat, is not only a symbol of desolation, but a cradle of some of humanity's most intriguing ancient puzzles. Among the many enigmas that dot the Sahara, one stands out: Nabta Playa. This remote and enigmatic site, located in southern Egypt, is home to a remarkable complex of stone circles, alignments, and artifacts that suggest a sophisticated culture once thrived here, thousands of years ago. Yet, what is truly perplexing is not the site itself, but the sudden and unexplained desertion of Nabta Playa. Why did this ceremonial and ritualistic center, flourishing around 4500 BC, fall silent and abandoned? The answer, as we will discover, remains one of history's most perplexing mysteries. Picture yourself standing at Nabta Playa, a vast, open space surrounded by the sun-drenched terrain of the desert. The air is heavy with the scent of earth and stone, and the silence is almost overwhelming. In front of you, large stone monoliths stand in silent witness to a time long past. These stones, arranged in a circular formation, echo the famous stone circles of the British Isles, though they are far older. This ceremonial center, predating Stonehenge by over 1,000 years, was once a hub for rituals and astronomical observations. As the sun rises over the horizon, you can almost imagine the ancient people who once gathered here, observing the celestial movements, aligning their rituals with the stars, and leaving behind their sacred symbols in stone. Yet, for all the wonder this place inspires, it is impossible to ignore the question that lingers in the air. What happened to those who built and used this remarkable site? Why did they leave it behind, seemingly without a trace? Nabta Playa was once a thriving ceremonial site, a center of spiritual and astronomical activity for the desert-dwelling people of the region. Radiocarbon dating suggests that it was in use as early as 4500 BC, a time when the Sahara was not the parched, barren wasteland it is today, but a lush, fertile environment teeming with life. The people of Nabta Playa had a deep understanding of the stars, evident in the precise alignment of the stone structures, which seem to mark the solstices and other key celestial events. This sophisticated understanding of astronomy suggests a culture capable of complex thought and organization, with a strong emphasis on ritual and spirituality. But, as is often the case with ancient civilizations, the story of Nabta Playa is not one of uninterrupted progress. Around 2200 BC, for reasons still unclear, the site was suddenly abandoned. The carefully arranged stone circles, the meticulously planned structures, all fell silent. The once thriving ceremonial center, which had drawn people from far and wide, was left to the mercy of the desert winds. So, what happened? Mainstream explanations often point to environmental factors. The Sahara, as we know, was once much wetter and more hospitable to life than it is today. The lush conditions that made Nabta Playa a viable settlement could have been disrupted by a slow but steady climate change. As the desert began to reclaim the land, water sources that sustained the people of Nabta Playa might have dried up, forcing them to abandon their sacred site in search of more hospitable areas. A slow, creeping desertification, compounded by a shift in the regional climate, could have rendered the site inhospitable, forcing the inhabitants to leave and seek refuge elsewhere. However, the suddenness of the desertion raises further questions. Was it purely a matter of climate change, or did something more abrupt and unforeseen contribute to the abandonment of this sacred site? Some have speculated that the people of Nabta Playa might have faced external pressures, perhaps from other migrating groups or invading tribes, though there is no evidence of violent conflict at the site. It is also worth noting that the site itself shows little sign of destruction or violent upheaval. The monoliths remain largely intact, and the surrounding area shows no signs of widespread devastation. Could the people have simply chosen to leave, perhaps due to internal social changes, shifting religious beliefs, or a change in the purpose of their rituals? There is also the possibility that Nabta Playa was not a permanent settlement in the traditional sense. Could it have been more of a seasonal or transient site, used only at specific times of the year for religious or ceremonial purposes? If so, then its desertion may have been a natural part of its cyclical use, with people leaving when their rituals no longer aligned with the changing needs of their society. Yet this theory still doesn't fully explain why a place of such apparent importance would simply fade into oblivion, its purpose forgotten over time. As we consider these possibilities, we are left with a deeper question. Did the abandonment of Nabta Playa signal the end of an era, or was it the beginning of something else? Some researchers have proposed that the people who once used Nabta Playa migrated to other regions, spreading their knowledge of astronomy and ritual to other cultures. The idea that they might have played a role in the formation of later, more well-known civilizations, such as those in Egypt or the Near East, lingers in the background. If so, could the abandonment of Nabta Playa have been part of a larger cultural shift, one that laid the groundwork for the rise of other great civilizations? The mystery of Nabta Playa's sudden desertion remains an open question, one that continues to intrigue archaeologists, historians, and those who are captivated by the secrets of the ancient world. While we may never know the full story behind the site's abandonment, it serves as a reminder of the fragility of human settlements and the forces, both environmental and social, that shape the course of history. What drove the people of Nabta Playa to leave behind their sacred site? And more importantly, what knowledge or beliefs did they carry with them as they vanished into the desert winds, leaving only their stones as silent witnesses to a lost chapter of our past? As we continue to search for answers, we can only wonder what other secrets lie buried beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to listen to the ancient echoes of a forgotten world. As we continue our exploration of ancient mysteries, we shift our focus to the Mesopotamian city of Shuruppak, a once thriving urban center that has intrigued archaeologists and historians for centuries. Situated on the banks of the Euphrates River, this ancient city was known for its wealth, its strategic location, and its connections to some of the earliest known civilizations. Today, it lies in ruin, its once bustling streets and markets now reduced to layers of dust and forgotten memories. But the story of Shuruppak is not merely one of decay. It is tied to one of the most enduring and mysterious events in human history: the Great Flood. Imagine walking through the ruins of Shuruppak, the sun beating down on the baked earth, the only sound the distant calls of birds and the wind stirring the dry, cracked soil. The city's mud-brick walls, now crumbling, once stood tall, sheltering its inhabitants from the harsh desert sun. The streets, once filled with the lively chatter of merchants and the rhythm of daily life, are now eerily silent. But the mystery of Shuruppak is not found solely in its quiet abandonment. It is found beneath the layers of earth, where traces of an ancient catastrophe have been discovered. In the early 20th century, archaeologists began excavating the site of Shuruppak, uncovering a series of flood layers that appeared to indicate a sudden and catastrophic inundation. These layers, composed of waterlogged soil and debris, seemed to suggest that Shuruppak was struck by a massive flood, one so severe that it forced the abandonment of the city. But what caused this flood? And why did it lead to the desertion of Shuruppak? Mainstream explanations for the flood layers often point to the natural flooding of the Euphrates River, which was known to overflow its banks during the annual melt of snow in the mountains to the north. These seasonal floods were a regular occurrence in ancient Mesopotamia, and cities like Shuruppak would have been accustomed to the rise and fall of the river's waters. But the flood layers found in Shuruppak are different from those typically associated with seasonal flooding. These layers appear to have been the result of an event far more catastrophic than any seasonal surge. The sheer volume of water and the rapidity of its arrival suggest that something much more dramatic may have been at play. Could this flood have been the result of an earthquake-induced river shift, redirecting the Euphrates and unleashing a deluge upon the city? Such natural disasters are not uncommon in regions prone to tectonic activity, and the timing of the flood coincides with a period of geological instability in the area. But while this theory is plausible, it does not fully explain the scale of destruction seen in the archaeological record. The evidence suggests a flood of biblical proportions, one that might have obliterated the city in a matter of days. Some researchers have speculated that the flood of Shuruppak could be connected to a wider regional phenomenon, such as a series of catastrophic floods that struck Mesopotamia and the surrounding areas around 2900 BC. Were other cities in the region also struck by sudden inundations? And if so, could these floods have been the result of a sudden climate shift, such as a dramatic rise in sea levels or a series of massive rainfall events that overwhelmed the natural floodplains? Of course, there is another, much more famous explanation for the Great Flood of Shuruppak, one that has captured the imagination of historians and theologians alike: the biblical flood story. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the ancient Mesopotamian hero recounts a tale of a great flood that destroyed much of humanity, sparing only a select few. The story closely mirrors the biblical account of Noah's Ark, and has led some scholars to wonder whether the flood of Shuruppak might have been the origin of these ancient myths. Could the flood layers discovered at the site be evidence of an event that inspired both the Gilgamesh epic and the biblical story? If so, the flood of Shuruppak could be seen as an event that transcended mere local history, becoming woven into the cultural fabric of civilizations across the ancient world. Yet, while this connection between the Shuruppak flood and the ancient flood myths is fascinating, it remains speculative. There is no direct evidence linking the flood of Shuruppak to the stories of Noah or Gilgamesh. Furthermore, the dating of the flood layers at Shuruppak places the event far earlier than the traditional dates of these flood myths. Could the biblical and Mesopotamian flood stories be based on a much older, now lost event, one that left behind only vague memories, passed down through generations and woven into myth? In addition to the natural explanations, some have raised more fringe theories about the flood and the subsequent abandonment of Shuruppak. Could the flood have been caused by an extraterrestrial event, such as the impact of a comet or asteroid, which triggered a massive sudden rise in water levels? While there is no physical evidence to support this idea, the notion of a celestial catastrophe impacting early human civilizations is a tantalizing one, especially considering the mysterious and unexplained nature of the event. Another theory suggests that the flood was part of a larger social or political upheaval. Could Shurupak's sudden abandonment be linked to a collapse in trade networks, internal social unrest, or the rise of a neighboring power. The city was known for its strategic location along the Euphrates, and any disruption to the flow of goods and resources could have had catastrophic consequences for its inhabitants. But, like the other theories, there is no definitive evidence to confirm this idea, and it remains an open question. As we stand before the remnants of Shuruppak, we are reminded of the fragility of human civilization. The ruins before us, though ancient and weathered by time, still tell the story of a once great city, reduced to rubble by forces that remain beyond our full understanding. The flood that struck Shuruppak may have been a natural disaster, a social upheaval, or something else entirely. But one thing is clear. The city's abandonment after the flood marks a turning point in the history of Mesopotamia. What caused the great flood that swept through Shuruppak? Was it a natural event, a celestial catastrophe, or something else? And why did this once thriving city, with its rich cultural and economic ties, fall silent after the waters receded? These are questions that continue to puzzle archaeologists, and the answers remain elusive. As we continue to search for clues, we are left to wonder, how much of the past still remains hidden beneath the layers of time, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look beyond the surface? The mystery of Shuruppak is far from over. As we leave behind the ruins of Shuruppak, our journey leads us westward, toward the ancient city of Mari, an archaeological site that has provided scholars with a wealth of knowledge about early Mesopotamian civilization. Yet, despite its many secrets, Mari holds one enigma that remains unsolved: the sudden and violent destruction of its earliest city layers. What caused the fall of Mari's nascent urban center, and why did it vanish so abruptly? Imagine walking through the dusty streets of Mari, where the sharp scent of earth mixes with the dry, unyielding air of the Syrian desert. The site, now a sprawling archaeological excavation, was once a bustling metropolis, strategically located along the Euphrates River. It was a place where trade, politics, and culture intersected, and where the earliest traces of urban life began to take shape in the Fertile Crescent. The foundations of homes and temples still lie scattered across the site, each one a testament to a thriving civilization. But beneath these ruins lies a mystery: the sudden and violent end of Mari's first city, a place that flourished for centuries before its destruction. Mari's earliest city layers, dating back to around 3000 BC, show signs of an advanced society, one that was engaged in trade, governance, and religious rituals. The city boasted impressive architecture, with large mud brick buildings and monumental structures, some of which were clearly used for religious or ceremonial purposes. Evidence suggests that Mari was a center of regional power, with a well-developed bureaucracy and a complex social structure. The city's rulers, known as the Ensi, controlled a vast territory, and the walls that surrounded Mari were a symbol of its strength and wealth. Yet, despite its apparent prosperity, something catastrophic occurred, abruptly bringing an end to this early phase of Mari's history. Archaeologists have uncovered signs of destruction in the form of burned layers, collapsed buildings, and broken pottery scattered across the site. These layers suggest that Mari's first city was destroyed by a violent event, one that was likely swift and overwhelming in its force. But what caused this destruction? One mainstream theory points to an external invasion, an attack by a foreign power, perhaps one of the neighboring Sumerian city-states, such as Uruk or Lagash, seeking to expand its influence over Mari's prosperous territory. The evidence for this theory lies in the destruction of the city's walls and the widespread burning of buildings. Such destruction could have been the result of a military campaign, with invaders tearing down the city's fortifications and setting fire to its buildings. But while this theory is plausible, there is little evidence to indicate the presence of an invading army at Mari during this period. No large-scale remains of siege weapons or fortifications have been discovered, and no written records describe a major conflict at this time. Alternatively, the destruction of Mari could have been the result of internal conflict. Could a rebellion within the city have led to its downfall? There are hints that Mari's rulers may have faced resistance from within, as tensions between different social or political factions could have erupted in violence. The burning and collapse of the buildings could reflect an internal uprising, perhaps led by a rival faction or a competing city-state that sought to challenge Mari's authority. This theory, however, is speculative and lacks concrete evidence. Moreover, the scale of the destruction suggests something more organized and deliberate, raising further questions about the nature of the event. One of the more intriguing and mysterious explanations for the destruction of Mari's earliest city layers centers around environmental factors, specifically the potential impact of climate change. The ancient Near East, like much of the world, was subject to dramatic fluctuations in climate, and evidence suggests that the region experienced periods of drought and instability during the 3rd millennium BC. Could a sudden change in the environment have triggered the collapse of Mari's early urban center? Some researchers believe that the city's destruction could have been precipitated by a severe drought, which may have strained the agricultural systems that supported the city's population. A sudden lack of resources, combined with social unrest or an inability to adapt to the changing climate, could have led to the city's abandonment or destruction. There are also fringe theories that suggest the destruction of Mari's earliest city layers may have been caused by a more mysterious and potentially more dramatic event. Some have speculated that the city's destruction was the result of a celestial impact, an asteroid or comet striking the Earth with devastating consequences. While there is no direct evidence to support this theory, it draws on the idea that ancient civilizations may have been subjected to catastrophic events that left no lasting traces, except for the sudden disappearance or destruction of entire cities. Could the burning and collapse of Mari's buildings have been the result of an impact event, or even a series of natural disasters like earthquakes or violent storms? This theory, though speculative, continues to spark the imagination of those who seek to explain the otherwise unexplained. And then there is the possibility that Mari's destruction was not a single event, but rather the result of a gradual decline. Perhaps the city's downfall was the culmination of a series of interconnected factors, an overextension of its resources, internal conflict, environmental stress, and perhaps a final destructive blow from an external force. If this was the case, then the city's destruction would not have been a single catastrophic moment, but rather the last chapter of a prolonged crisis. This idea presents a more complex and layered view of the city's fall, one that acknowledges the multiple forces that could have worked together to bring about its end. As we stand before the ruins of Mari, the walls that once protected its inhabitants now crumbled and shattered, we are left to ponder the true cause of its early destruction. Was it an external invasion, a social uprising, an environmental collapse, or something even more mysterious? The evidence at Mari points to a violent and sudden end, but the precise nature of the event remains elusive. While we may never uncover all the details of what happened to Mari's earliest city layers, the mystery of its destruction offers us a glimpse into the fragility of ancient civilizations and the forces, both natural and human, that shaped the course of history. The destruction of Mari may have been a localized event, but it echoes through time, reminding us of the unknown dangers that have always lurked on the edges of human civilization. What caused the fall of Mari? Could it have been a single event, or was it the result of a slow unraveling? And most tantalizing of all, could there be other forgotten cities out there, waiting to reveal their own mysteries, hidden beneath the sands of time, just waiting to be uncovered? As the sun sets over the vast expanse of the Arabian Peninsula, casting long shadows over its arid landscape, a mysterious silence falls over the once thriving settlements that once dotted this region. The dry winds sweep across the barren remnants of ancient cities, ruins that tell of a time long past when the Arabian Peninsula was home to bustling communities, thriving trade routes, and complex societies. Yet today, these settlements are empty. The questions surrounding their sudden abandonment are as old as the desert itself, and the answers remain just as elusive. Among the most enigmatic of these vanished cities are those that lie within the Nafud Desert and the Rub al-Khali, the vast, empty quarter. Once, these areas supported early human habitation, with archaeological evidence suggesting thriving settlements from as early as 3000 BC. These early communities, spread across the peninsula, were connected by trade, and their settlements were strategically located near water sources, trade routes, and fertile lands. In their prime, these communities were vibrant and sophisticated, with evidence of domesticated animals, agriculture, and advanced pottery techniques. But the records, written and unwritten, offer little clarity on what happened to these communities. What led to their sudden disappearance? How did the flourishing cities, so dependent on trade and agriculture, simply vanish from the historical record? One theory that has been widely discussed by scholars is environmental change. The Arabian Peninsula, though it now seems largely inhospitable, was once home to lush oases and expansive, fertile regions. But around 4000 BC, significant climatic shifts began to reshape the environment. The region saw a gradual but undeniable increase in aridity, which would have had a profound effect on both agriculture and the availability of water. Where there were once rivers and lakes, there were now only dry riverbeds and sand. Could this shift in climate have been the catalyst for the abandonment of these early settlements? As the environment became more unforgiving, the people living in these regions would have faced growing difficulties in sustaining themselves. Water sources dwindled, fertile land became barren, and the very lifeblood of these communities, agriculture, was no longer viable. Unable to adapt to these changing conditions, the people may have been forced to abandon their homes and seek refuge elsewhere. However, this theory, while plausible, does not offer a complete explanation. Climate change is a slow-moving force, one that would have given these communities time to adjust, relocate, or innovate. And yet, many of the settlements in the Arabian Peninsula seem to have been abandoned virtually overnight. The suddenness of their disappearance raises further questions. Was climate change the sole cause? Or were other factors at play? Some scholars suggest that social or political factors could have played a larger role. Early settlements in the Arabian Peninsula were often interconnected through complex networks of trade and alliances. Could these networks have collapsed, leading to the disintegration of once powerful city-states? Evidence of shifting power dynamics, internal strife, or even external conflicts could have played a part in these cities' demise. The caravan trade routes that once brought goods and prosperity to the region may have been disrupted, or the networks that tied these communities together could have unraveled due to political instability or warfare. Another intriguing possibility is the role of shifting tribal dynamics. Early Arabian societies were largely nomadic, and with the establishment of more permanent settlements, a tension between settled agriculturalists and mobile herders may have intensified. It's possible that in some regions, nomadic tribes, which had adapted to the harsh desert conditions, were able to outlast the settled communities, further displacing them and contributing to their eventual abandonment. Yet, despite these possible explanations, the suddenness of the abandonment of these settlements continues to defy simple answers. The archaeological evidence suggests that in some places, entire towns were left behind with few signs of conflict or destruction. Structures were not always burned or looted. Instead, they were simply deserted, as if their inhabitants had been forced to leave without a trace, leaving their possessions and livelihoods behind. Some fringe theories propose even more dramatic explanations for the desertion of these cities. Could there have been a catastrophic event, like an earthquake or a volcanic eruption, that struck the region unexpectedly? Could the desert's vast, seemingly endless sands have hidden a massive environmental disaster, something that occurred with such suddenness and violence that it overwhelmed the settlements and left them in ruin? While there is no direct evidence to support these more extreme theories, they linger as potential explanations for an event that left no lasting trace. As the sands of time continue to cover the remains of these early Arabian cities, the mystery of their abandonment grows ever deeper. Was it the slow and inevitable force of environmental change? The collapse of trade networks, or the disruption of social order? Or was there something more sudden, something we have yet to fully understand, that caused these once vibrant communities to vanish? Standing on the edge of the empty quarter, staring out across the desolate horizon, it is hard not to wonder what other secrets are hidden beneath the sand. What remains of the people who once called this desert home? What drove them to leave so suddenly, and where did they go? Perhaps, as the layers of the desert slowly shift, new clues will emerge, revelations that will shed light on one of the most perplexing mysteries of the ancient world. But until then, the silence of the Arabian Peninsula speaks for itself, offering no answers, only questions. As the first rays of dawn stretch across the fertile plains of ancient Mesopotamia, one is transported back in time to a land where vast marshes teemed with life, and early human settlements flourished along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It is here, in this cradle of civilization, that one of the most intriguing and unexplained phenomena in ancient history occurred: the sudden end of the Ubaid expansion. The Ubaid period, which began around 6500 BC, marks a defining chapter in the early history of Mesopotamia. For centuries, the Ubaid culture thrived and spread across southern Mesopotamia, creating complex settlements, monumental architecture, and a sophisticated way of life. But as mysteriously as the Ubaid period rose to prominence, it seemed to fade away just as quickly, leaving behind a web of unanswered questions. The Ubaid people are known for their distinct pottery, advanced irrigation systems, and impressive architectural structures, which included some of the earliest temples and communal buildings. Their settlements were strategically located along the fertile riverbanks of the Tigris and Euphrates, where they cultivated crops and raised livestock in the rich soil that was replenished annually by the river's floods. The Ubaid people also engaged in long-distance trade, exchanging goods with neighboring regions and fostering a sense of regional interconnectedness that laid the foundation for the rise of later civilizations in Mesopotamia. By 4000 BC, the Ubaid culture had spread far beyond its heartland, reaching into areas that would later become the Sumerian and Akkadian regions. Archaeological sites, such as Tel Weli and Eridu, offer a glimpse into the grandeur of Ubaid settlements, where well-planned cities were established with intricate street layouts, monumental temples, and sophisticated water management systems. The Ubaid civilization appeared poised to dominate the region for centuries to come. However, something happened in the centuries that followed. The Ubaid culture's remarkable expansion came to an abrupt halt. Around 3800 BC, the flourishing Ubaid settlements began to decline, and the once thriving cities were abandoned or destroyed. This sudden end to the Ubaid expansion is a puzzle that has baffled archaeologists and historians for generations. At first glance, the explanation for this sudden decline might seem obvious: environmental factors. Mesopotamia, as we know, is a region subject to the capricious forces of nature. The annual flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates provided the fertile soil for agriculture, but it could also devastate settlements in times of extreme floods or droughts. Some scholars have proposed that a sudden shift in climate led to the deterioration of the environment, making the once rich marshlands inhospitable. If the floods became irregular, if there was a prolonged drought, or if the water sources became polluted, the Ubaid people would have struggled to sustain their agriculture and their cities. However, evidence of catastrophic environmental shifts that could explain the widespread abandonment of Ubaid settlements is scarce. While climate change may have played a role, the evidence for a sudden, region-wide environmental collapse remains speculative. Other theories suggest that the Ubaid settlements were abandoned due to internal factors, such as social unrest or economic failure. Did the complex systems of irrigation and trade that the Ubaid people relied upon collapse under their own weight? Were there conflicts between different Ubaid settlements, or perhaps between the Ubaid people and emerging groups, such as the Proto-Sumerians? If such conflicts occurred, the results could have been devastating to the stability of Ubaid society. Yet, the most perplexing aspect of the Ubaid decline is the lack of clear evidence of any form of violent conflict or large-scale destruction. Unlike many other ancient civilizations, where the fall of cities is marked by evidence of war, conquest, or destruction, the end of the Ubaid expansion seems almost too quiet. There are no widespread signs of warfare, and the archaeological record does not indicate that the Ubaid settlements were destroyed in a dramatic or violent manner. Instead, many of the abandoned cities appear to have been simply left behind, their inhabitants vanishing from the historical record as quietly as they had appeared. Some scholars suggest that the Ubaid decline may have been a gradual process. The early cities of the Ubaid period could have been replaced by a more decentralized form of society as new populations, such as the Sumerians, began to establish their own settlements and trade networks. This shift may have marked the end of the Ubaid's dominance over the region, though the Ubaid culture itself may have persisted in some form, influencing later Mesopotamian civilizations. But this explanation still leaves open the question of why these settlements were not destroyed or replaced with greater intensity, why there was such a sudden and seemingly quiet shift in the balance of power. In recent years, a more speculative theory has gained traction. Some researchers have pointed to the possibility of a massive societal collapse, driven by factors beyond environmental and social pressures. Could the end of the Ubaid expansion have been the result of an external force, a catastrophic event so immense that it overwhelmed the already fragile settlements? The idea of a natural disaster, such as a sudden earthquake, volcanic eruption, or even an unrecorded comet impact, has been suggested as a possible explanation for the disappearance of Ubaid cities. This theory proposes that such an event could have led to widespread panic, disrupting trade and agricultural systems, and forcing the inhabitants to abandon their cities without warning. However, this theory is largely speculative, and no conclusive evidence has been found to support such a dramatic hypothesis. As with so many mysteries of the ancient world, the end of the Ubaid expansion remains an enigma. What we do know is that the culture's legacy left an indelible mark on Mesopotamia's subsequent civilizations, especially the Sumerians, who adopted many aspects of Ubaid culture, from architecture to religious practices. Yet, the question of why such an advanced society seemed to vanish without a trace remains tantalizing. Could the sudden end of the Ubaid expansion be the result of a combination of environmental, social, and external factors, all converging at the same time? Or was there some unknown, larger force at play that we have yet to uncover? The silence surrounding the fate of these early settlers in Mesopotamia speaks volumes. As researchers continue to sift through the ruins and examine the evidence, one thing remains certain. The true story behind the end of the Ubaid expansion is still buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be revealed. Perhaps, in the future, new discoveries will shed light on this elusive chapter of history. Until then, the question lingers. What caused the Ubaid to disappear so suddenly, and what remains hidden beneath the quiet remnants of these once thriving cities? As the sun rises over the sprawling sands of Egypt, it casts a long shadow over the Great Pyramids of Giza. These monumental structures, which have stood for over 4,500 years, remain the pinnacle of ancient engineering, symbols of power, mystery, and ingenuity. Yet beneath their colossal stone surfaces lies an enigma, a gap in Egypt's history that remains unexplained. How did such an advanced civilization, capable of creating these vast monuments to the gods, suddenly abandon pyramid construction after the 6th dynasty, around 2200 BC? The era of pyramid building in Egypt began long before the 6th dynasty, during the Old Kingdom, when pharaohs commissioned the construction of increasingly grandiose tombs. These pyramids were not just royal tombs. They were manifestations of divine power, created to ensure the eternal life of the pharaohs. The most famous, of course, are the pyramids of Giza, built during the 4th dynasty, including the Great Pyramid of Khufu, which once stood as the tallest man-made structure on Earth. For centuries, pyramid construction progressed in complexity, size, and sophistication. The 4th dynasty pyramids are the most iconic, yet even after their completion, Egypt continued to build grand pyramids during the 5th and 6th dynasties. However, after the reign of Pharaoh Pepi II, the last ruler of the 6th dynasty, pyramid construction, at least on the scale that had defined the Old Kingdom, came to a sudden halt. No grand pyramids were constructed for centuries, and the burial practices of the pharaohs underwent a significant transformation. What happened? Many theories have been proposed to explain this abrupt cessation of pyramid building, but the true cause remains elusive. The traditional narrative points to a period of political and social upheaval. After the reign of Pepi II, Egypt fell into a time of instability, known as the First Intermediate Period, marked by famine, decentralization, and internal strife. It is possible that the central authority of the pharaoh was weakened, and with it, the resources and manpower needed to construct the Grand Pyramids. However, the idea of a sudden political collapse does not fully explain why the ancient Egyptians chose to abandon pyramid construction entirely. The pyramids were not just architectural feats, they were integral to the religious and cultural beliefs of the time. The belief that the pharaohs were divine figures, the intermediaries between the gods and the people, was central to Egyptian identity. For the pyramids to have been abandoned so completely suggests that something far more profound than mere political instability may have been at play. Some scholars point to a potential shift in religious and cultural values. During the reign of Pepi II, the power of the Old Kingdom pharaohs began to wane. The religious focus may have shifted from the grand pyramids and monumental tombs to more humble tombs and personal monuments. The notion of the pharaoh as a living god, whose divine presence required massive structures to honor him, might have evolved into a more individualistic form of worship, one that was less reliant on grand construction projects. Others propose that the halt in pyramid construction was the result of economic collapse or environmental factors. The massive workforce required to build the pyramids, tens of thousands of laborers, needed a steady supply of resources: stone, wood, food, and water. What if the environment of Egypt began to change, leading to a disruption in these essential supplies? There are theories suggesting that shifting climatic conditions, such as droughts or a decrease in the annual flooding of the Nile, could have affected the agricultural productivity of the land, leading to famine and social unrest. This, in turn, would have made the construction of massive pyramids unfeasible. However, the absence of any clear evidence of environmental change during this period raises more questions. Were the Egyptians facing environmental hardship? And if so, why did it have such a profound impact on their architectural practices? If the Nile had indeed failed to flood as reliably as it had in the past, why did the Egyptians not adapt their building techniques to more modest constructions? Or was the shift away from pyramid building symbolic of something larger, an ideological or religious transformation that we can only guess at? In recent years, some more speculative theories have emerged, suggesting that the sudden abandonment of pyramid construction could be tied to an event or series of events that shook the Egyptians to their core, something so catastrophic that it altered the course of history. Some believe that an invasion or a devastating war could have disrupted Egypt's society to such an extent that the resources and manpower once dedicated to pyramid building were redirected toward survival. Another theory involves the mysterious so-called collapse of the pyramid complex, which some argue might have been linked to a belief in an impending apocalypse or divine judgment. Could the Egyptian elite have believed that the pyramids, with their towering monuments to kings and gods, were no longer appropriate in a world facing imminent destruction? This theory, however, remains speculative at best, and little concrete evidence supports it. More tantalizing is the possibility that the sudden halt in pyramid construction was not due to a collapse, but rather the beginning of a cultural shift. Egypt's religious beliefs were centered on the afterlife and the idea of immortality. But what if a change in these beliefs occurred? What if the Egyptians believed that they had achieved everything they needed with the monumental pyramids, and now they were ready for a new form of worship, one that no longer required such massive, labor-intensive projects? The question of why the pyramids came to a halt after the 6th dynasty is not only an architectural or historical mystery, it is a window into the shifting worldviews of ancient Egypt. What did the Egyptians believe about death, the afterlife, and their relationship with the gods at this point in history? Why did they stop building the grand pyramids that had been a symbol of their power and their eternal connection to the divine? While scholars continue to debate the causes of the halt in pyramid construction, the silence surrounding this moment in Egypt's history speaks volumes. What truly happened during the twilight years of the Old Kingdom? And why did the Egyptians abandon the most iconic monuments ever created by humanity, leaving behind only their incomplete legacy? As we examine the ruins, the broken stones of the pyramids, and the ancient texts that have survived the millennia, we are left with more questions than answers. The mysteries of Egypt's Old Kingdom are far from solved, and as we look to the future of archaeological discovery, one must wonder, what other secrets might still be buried beneath the shifting sands of time? And could the true reason for the end of pyramid construction be hidden in the gaps between the stones, waiting for someone to uncover it? As dawn breaks over the rolling hills of the Balkan Peninsula, a haunting silence lingers in the air. This is a landscape that once teemed with thriving, sophisticated societies that mastered the art of metallurgy long before most of the ancient world. Beneath the soil, hidden in forgotten valleys and crumbling settlements, lie the remnants of a once vibrant culture, the Copper Age civilizations of the Balkans. The most famous of these are the enigmatic people of the Varna necropolis, whose elaborate gold treasures continue to captivate archaeologists. Yet, in a shocking turn of events, these cultures seem to have vanished almost overnight. The settlements that flourished in the wake of the Varna civilization and the intricate social systems that supported them disappeared in a way that defies explanation. The Varna necropolis, discovered in modern-day Bulgaria, stands as a testament to the incredible sophistication of the early Copper Age societies that once inhabited the region. Dating to around 4,500 BC, it is a burial site that contains over 300 graves, many adorned with gold and copper artifacts that seem almost too advanced for their time. The wealth and opulence displayed in these graves suggest a highly organized society, possibly governed by a ruling elite that controlled resources, trade routes, and religious practices. This civilization was among the first to use gold for ceremonial purposes, crafting ornaments that glittered with the same brilliance as the rising sun. For decades, archaeologists have marveled at the sophisticated nature of this civilization. Yet, as we move forward in time, a startling transformation occurs. By 4200 BC, after the height of the Varna culture, the Copper Age societies of the Balkans experienced a rapid and unexplained collapse. What happened to the people who lived in the settlements surrounding the Varna necropolis? Why did entire villages, once thriving with complex trade networks and advanced metallurgy, seemingly vanish without a trace? The collapse is abrupt and mysterious. From the wealth of Varna, the Balkans descended into a period of scarcity and isolation. Settlements that were once populated by skilled craftsmen and farmers began to crumble. The great trade routes that had once connected these societies to the wider ancient world seemed to have closed. The wealth of gold and copper, once plentiful and fiercely guarded, disappeared from the archaeological record. But why? Was it a catastrophic event, or something more gradual, a slow erosion of the social order that led to the collapse? Mainstream explanations often cite environmental or climatic factors as the most plausible causes for this sudden disappearance. Some suggest that a major shift in climate patterns, possibly a long-term drought or a change in the course of rivers that once nourished these settlements, may have forced the people of the Balkan Copper Age to abandon their homes. Such a dramatic change would have placed immense pressure on agricultural production, making it impossible for these complex societies to sustain themselves. If the rivers that once brought life to the fertile plains began to dry up, it could explain the rapid depopulation of these settlements. Yet, the evidence for such a climatic catastrophe remains thin. Soil cores from the region do not show conclusive signs of a major drought, and the weather patterns during the period remain ambiguous. Could the explanation lie elsewhere? Some have proposed that the end of the Copper Age settlements might be linked to internal conflicts, perhaps even a breakdown in the social structures that once governed the region. The wealth displayed in the Varna necropolis suggests a society of great inequality, with a powerful elite that controlled the trade and distribution of resources. Could this inequality have led to social unrest, uprisings, or warfare? Could the elites, once at the pinnacle of power, have been overthrown, leading to the destruction of their cities and the flight of their people? Others wonder if the end of the Copper Age settlements in the Balkans could have been a consequence of shifting trade networks. The Balkans were positioned at a critical crossroads for trade, connecting Europe with the Near East and Asia. Perhaps as new civilizations began to rise in other parts of the ancient world, the previously rich trade routes began to change, cutting off these settlements from vital resources. What if the people of the Balkans, once dependent on external trade for their survival, found themselves isolated in an increasingly competitive world? One particularly tantalizing theory is that the sudden disappearance of these settlements might be tied to a larger cultural shift, one that moved away from the reliance on precious metals and complex social hierarchies. After the collapse of the Varna culture, it is possible that the people of the Balkans turned their focus inward, abandoning the elaborate rituals and material wealth that defined their past. What if, after centuries of material accumulation, these people decided to abandon the trappings of their former lives and embrace a simpler, more communal existence? This theory would explain why there is little evidence of widespread destruction or violent conflict in the archaeological record. Instead, it would suggest that the people of the Balkans slowly and deliberately walked away from their former way of life. However, this theory also raises more questions than answers. How could such a dramatic cultural shift happen so quickly and on such a broad scale? What could have driven these people to abandon the very practices that had once made them powerful and influential in the ancient world? Some scholars have even suggested that the collapse of the Copper Age Balkan settlements could have been the result of external invasions, perhaps from people in the east, from the rising civilizations of Mesopotamia or the steppe. Could the Balkans, so rich in copper and gold, have become a target for raiders or conquerors? Or was the disappearance of these settlements more of a self-imposed isolation, a turning inward that effectively cut them off from the outside world? As the mystery deepens, one thing remains clear. The disappearance of the early Copper Age settlements in the Balkans, post-Varna, is one of the most intriguing and unexplained phenomena in ancient history. Despite the wealth and sophistication of the Varna civilization and the apparent complexity of the societies that followed, they vanished with little trace. Perhaps the answer to this mystery lies somewhere beneath the shifting sands and forgotten ruins, waiting to be uncovered. Or perhaps it's a reminder of how quickly civilizations can rise and fall, leaving only shadows behind. Whatever the truth may be, the people of the Balkan Copper Age left a mark on history that still beckons us to unravel its secrets. Could their sudden disappearance be the result of something more profound than we can yet understand? And will we ever uncover the true reason behind the vanishing of these ancient settlements, or will they remain lost to time? Nestled in the heart of what is now Turkey, the ancient mound of Çatalhöyük rises like a silent sentinel of the past. Its jagged, weathered edges, the remnants of buildings layered upon buildings, tell the story of a city unlike any other in the early Holocene. Çatalhöyük, at its peak, was one of the largest and most complex human settlements of its time. Its compact, tightly clustered homes, built side by side with no streets or clear pathways between them, evoke a sense of mystery. How did these early people live within such confined spaces? How did they communicate, and how did they organize such a seemingly insular society? The answers may lie within the forgotten walls of this ancient city. Yet, as we explore its final occupation phases, we are left with an unsettling question. Why did this thriving community abandon its most intricate and well-established settlement after centuries of habitation? At its height, around 6000 BC, Çatalhöyük was a bustling center of life, home to thousands of people who lived in multi-generational homes. The city is renowned for its distinctive architecture, rectangular mud brick houses arranged in a honeycomb pattern, their walls adorned with murals, figurines, and symbols that seem to tell a story we can no longer fully decipher. The inhabitants were early farmers, domesticating crops and animals, and they relied on trade and craft production to sustain their community. They had a rich spiritual life, with shrines and altars within their homes and symbols that hint at complex belief systems. But as time passed, this once thriving settlement began to see signs of stress. By around 5500 BC, during the final phases of Çatalhöyük's occupation, something remarkable and deeply puzzling occurred. The city, once a vibrant center of life and culture, began to lose its momentum. The meticulous organization of homes began to break down. The intricately painted murals that adorned the walls, which had once told stories of daily life, warfare, and spirituality, started to fade. In the final layers of occupation, the settlement underwent significant changes, marked by abrupt shifts in both material culture and the layout of the city. The abandonment of Çatalhöyük has intrigued archaeologists for decades. The evidence shows that the inhabitants did not suffer from a single catastrophic event, like a devastating earthquake, flood, or invasion. The city wasn't destroyed in a violent conflict. Instead, its people simply left. Slowly but surely, the city fell silent, its houses slowly filled with dust and forgotten memories. But why? What could have driven this vibrant community, so well established and connected with the world around it, to abandon their homes? One of the leading theories proposes that environmental factors played a significant role in the abandonment of Çatalhöyük. As a society dependent on agriculture, the inhabitants would have been keenly aware of the cycles of the environment. Evidence from nearby sites shows a shift in climate conditions during this period, possibly a period of drought or shifts in local rainfall patterns. If resources such as water or fertile land began to dwindle, the population of Çatalhöyük may have faced agricultural failure, prompting the slow decline of the settlement. But is that the full story? A deeper examination of the site suggests that something more complex might have been at play. Some have posited that internal societal changes contributed to the city's decline. Çatalhöyük had always been a densely populated city with a highly communal way of life, where houses were built directly on top of one another, and people entered and exited their homes through the roofs. Over time, these close living conditions may have fostered social unrest. Were there tensions among different groups within the settlement? Could there have been a breakdown in the social contract that held the community together? In a society without clearly defined hierarchies, the erosion of communal norms could have led to a disintegration of the shared identity that kept the people of Çatalhöyük bound together. Another intriguing possibility is that the inhabitants of Çatalhöyük left for reasons that are not entirely economic or social. The city's inhabitants were highly spiritual, as evidenced by the shrines and symbolic carvings found within their homes. But there is evidence of a subtle shift in religious practices during the final occupation phases. Some have suggested that the spiritual and ritualistic practices that had been central to the community's identity began to lose their significance. Could the abandonment of the city have been a kind of spiritual or religious decision, as the inhabitants felt that their practices no longer resonated with the changing times? Did the people of Çatalhöyük leave because they believed the gods were no longer with them, or because their connection to the land and to one another had fractured in ways they could not repair? While most theories point toward environmental stress, social upheaval, or religious shifts, one of the most provocative ideas suggests that the abandonment of Çatalhöyük was not the result of any external or internal catastrophe, but rather a deliberate decision. Could the people have chosen to leave in search of something new? Was this an early example of the human tendency to seek out fresh opportunities, to break away from what has become stale and explore new horizons? As agriculturalists and traders, the inhabitants of Çatalhöyük would have been keenly aware of the shifting world around them. It is possible that they simply chose to migrate in search of new resources, new trade routes, and new ways of life. Moreover, could this migration have been part of a larger pattern of movement throughout the region during this time? Archaeologists have found evidence of similar abandonment patterns in nearby settlements, suggesting that the decline of Çatalhöyük was not an isolated phenomenon. Were the inhabitants of Çatalhöyük part of a broader societal shift, one that saw several ancient communities abandoning their urban centers in favor of more mobile, less rigid ways of life? As we step back and examine the layers of history at Çatalhöyük, we are left with a profound mystery. What happened to the people who once inhabited this vibrant, complex settlement? Did they leave because of environmental pressures, social unrest, or spiritual disillusionment? Or did they, like countless human communities before and after them, choose to leave in search of something better, something unknown? The questions surrounding the abandonment of Çatalhöyük remain unanswered, and with every excavation, new pieces of the puzzle are revealed. Yet the true nature of their departure remains elusive. The city itself, with its worn-down walls and faded murals, holds its secrets tightly. And as time passes, the memory of Çatalhöyük, like so many ancient sites, becomes further entwined with the mysteries of the past. As archaeologists continue to dig, the story of Çatalhöyük's final years beckons us to ask, what remains hidden beneath the surface of the earth, waiting to be discovered? What drove its people away, and could we ever truly understand the forces that shaped their decision to vanish from the face of the earth? The silence of Çatalhöyük may never fully be broken, but perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all.